This is perfect. The Spurs just made a sneaky signing of Malachi Flynn on a 1-year deal. We'll break down here what that means for the San Antonio Spurs roster moving forward and what he can put forth on the court for the San Antonio Spurs this season. This here is Spurs Digest with your host, Keenan Warner. Before we get into Malachi Flynn becoming a Spur, hit that subscribe button, take a spur of the moment so you can get every Spurs moment moving forward. Malachi Flynn, that name might sound familiar to people who watch basketball. It's like, oh yeah, it was that guy that dropped 50 points this year against the Hawks on April 3rd. The Hawks Tre Jones was not playing in the game, but DeJounte Murray was playing in that game. He tried to check him. Malachi Flynn went 18 of 25 in that game. Some of the buckets did come in crunch time. His 50th came with 30 seconds left, but hey, 50 points is 50 points. We didn't see Chris Paul put up 50 points. I believe he's the only Spur right now who's had a 50-point game in the NBA. So he's got that over Wemby. He's got that over Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes, Devin Vassell. The list goes on with the Spurs. Great. But Malachi Flynn. Free agent guard Malachi Flynn, reported by Shams, so it's Shams, has agreed to a 1-year deal with the San Antonio Spurs, sources tell The Athletic. Flynn, career-high 50, as I had mentioned, in April, averaged 8 points in 14 minutes per game for the Pistons last season. Overall, Flynn, solid player. 5.5 points, 2 assists, about 2 rebounds last year. That was his entire stint last year. He was in Toronto and then got moved to New York in the R.J. Barrett trade. And then he got moved to Detroit, and that was the Knicks trying to get cap space, the Knicks trying to get cap space because they had Quentin Grimes, they let go of him, Evan Fournier let go of him, and then they got a couple picks and some cash consideration. So they were trying to make some cap space, apparently to get Mikal Bridges, which they did in the offseason this year. But Malachi Flynn, what is he going to bring to this San Antonio Spurs roster? Well, Malachi Flynn, the 29th pick in the draft in 2020. We didn't get to see him in the tournament because that was the year COVID hit. Everything kind of got put into shambles. They went with the AP poll. Kansas ended up being the national championship champions. They went from a preseason unranked team at San Diego State. They went 30-2 that year, and they got all the way up to the 6th seed, in large part because Malachi Flynn led them in scoring and was one of their top assistmen as well. He is a guard. He's a shorter guard, about 6'1", 6'2"-ish, 175. He's quick. Everything about his game, his handle-wise, the way he plays, it's well-balanced. Tight handle. He's a guy who's not going to play outside of himself. Even in his 50-point game, he didn't put up 40 shots. We've seen even DeJounte Murray, he put up 44 in a game. We've seen Trae Young, Jalen Brunson put up 40 shots in the game. He was 18 of 25. He was forcing the issue when he needed to, but he wasn't trying to do too much on the court. And that's something that, as a San Antonio Spur, you need to do because Gregg Popovich wants you to play within his system, but he also wants you to have freedom within that system. He wants you to be the best version of yourself while being able to play in the confines of the San Antonio Spurs dynamic. And you've got a guy like Chris Paul to learn from. Obviously, one of the GOATs of this generation for point guard. Devin Vassell has definitely carried himself and progressed as a player in the league, so you've got Devin Vassell to learn from as well. The guards on the Spurs, Stephon Castle to add with that. I know he's young, but he's still a guy, a smart kid, absolutely has a lot of potential in this game. The Spurs have a lot of depth at guard, but Malachi Flynn's going to be able to come in there. He's going to give you quality minutes. He can shoot from 3. I know he's only around 31%, but he can shoot it from 3 if need be, especially because they're going to be open shots. But he's a guy who can play sound defense, can control a system, and can give you quality minutes off the bench. Well, with him another quality player coming in, because that's all the San Antonio Spurs have is quality players. What does that mean for the San Antonio Spurs? Well, the move was kind of surprise for a one-year contract. As Matt Guzman says here, this completely fills the young squad's roster, and if Flynn's contract is in fact a standard one, and if not for training camp, someone will need to be moved before opening night. Who will that be? We don't know. Will it be in a trade? Are the Spurs working their way up to maybe move off of somebody so they have extra guard depth? Are they just planning on cutting one of these guys and seeing what's going on in training camp? I don't know. We don't know what the Spurs are going to do, and that's okay. The Spurs do not always move in traditional ways. They move in a Spurs-like manner, and that's gotten them 5 championships, so I think they know what they're doing over there. Of course, you need a spearhead like a GOAT-level guy, a Tim Duncan. You've got David Robinson. You've got that now in Wemby, of course. So you build around there. It's going to be interesting to see Malachi work with him in the pick and roll, see what he can learn from Chris Paul, what kind of minutes he will get on this roster, because towards the end of the year, averaged 8 points with Detroit, even though he only averaged 5 over the season. Once he was finally starting to get his run towards the end of the season, he was showing what he can do. And a guy who can get 50 in a game, I understand it's the NBA now, and a lot of it's offensive, but 50 points in one game? Again, Chris Paul hasn't done that. I know Chris Paul is a point god, but Chris Paul even hasn't done that, so that's a feat in all of itself for Malachi Flynn. Malachi Flynn's going to be an interesting and sneaky good pickup addition for the San Antonio Spurs this season. There's going to be games where you look on the floor, you're like, oh, who is that guy? Oh, that's Malachi. That's okay. We'll see. He's going to have to find his way in the rotation because the guard depth on the San Antonio Spurs is it's deep. They've got a lot of guard depth. They've got a lot of player depth, a lot of young talent. We'll see where it fits in. We'll see how the rotations go throughout the season. Obviously, especially with Chris Paul's health, too, he's not going to play you 82 games, so you're going to need fill in the blanks there while they're on their playoff push throughout the entirety of the season. But shout out to Malachi Flynn. Shout out to the San Antonio Spurs on a one-year deal to get him on the roster. A guy who dropped 50 last season finally gets himself a contract. Congratulations to Malachi Flynn. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about the Malachi Flynn signing. Does it mean nothing? Is it a sneaky good one like I believe? Or what are your thoughts overall on the Malachi Flynn signing? This was Spurs Digest with Keenan Warner. I thank all of you.